Hello, how are you today and where are you dialing from?
Hi,
Hi, yeah, Avni. Start.
I think that's why we needed this session. So I'm dialing in from Gurgaon, which is in India, and I'm doing excellent. Really excited
Great.
to talk today. Yeah.
And Ivana?
Well, I'm right now in Dubai, so it's pretty hot, but it's good.
I'm dialing from Poland and it's pretty cold in here, so I'm jealous. Well, thank you for taking your time and actually joining my hot seat session, the goal of which is to help companies and businesses all over the world to address their blind spots with the help of our wonderful mentors. So first of all, I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us about your expertise. Avni, you can start.
Okay. So I'm Avni, and I work as a communication coach and a soft skill consultant, and I've been in this industry since the past 11 years now. But I started off as a software engineer, which comes across as a surprise for most people that, how come the switch happened. But I realized very early enough that there was some place else that my talents were calling me. At the same time, I realized that there were a lot of issues that were plaguing the workplace industry. So I thought, instead of just delving on it and thinking what to do, why not to just tackle it right then and there. So that's what
Thank
it is.
you. Ivana?
Yeah, so I started my journey working for semi-governmental sector. It was administrative / marketing. And then I slowly moved to operation and then HR. So I kind of earned a vast experience in various departments, I would say, or layers of departments. But in the past 11 years, mostly I focused on HR and recruitment and strategies when it comes to not just HR, but operations and other aspects of the company or organizations. Yeah, so that's that.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So today we're going to talk about actually my favorite topic, which is conflict resolution, because a lot of us, we think that we're able to do this, but when it comes to the conflict, we're just getting lost. So my first question goes to Ivana. As an HR representative, what role does HR play in conflict resolution and how they can help facilitate open communication among employees?
It's a great actually question. I would first ask what really conflict is, because for many people, conflict is just a direct argument or disagreement, but actually conflict has many layers, many hats. Okay, HR role is to understand its people, who are the people working in the company, and understand their own department. If you cannot fix what's inside wrong, you cannot help others to mitigate or navigate through different, I wouldn't say conflicts, but sometimes misunderstanding, because conflicts, the major for me as a HR is it's part of miscommunication or lack of communication. There is misperceptions. Misperceptions cause a huge amount of conflicts in the workplace, and that's actually, I'm speaking from experience. I would say HR should or could do better when it comes to trying to mitigate conflicts between co-workers or management and the employees, because again, the conflicts can come from in various hats and in various ways, right? I would say that HR has a huge job to do when it comes to setting boundaries on how to communicate, how to perceive other person. So I'll give a few examples, quick ones. Let's say a lot of people think like it's a conflicts are, or conflict resolution should be done from the management, or it starts from poor management, from lack of job descriptions and so on. Actually, it doesn't. what happened is it's the procedures that are the keys. Procedures build a culture. Without procedures, you don't have a culture. And I'm not saying a strict policing everyone. It's not about that. It's about if I design a job description for someone, I have to do that with my colleague who's the head of department or a section lead who understand each role of the persons that are working in his team or her team, right? But without that, even with that, sometimes we have to step in and do another task because, for example, one of our colleagues gets sick and we have to step in, right? There should be a set of procedures that would help a person to fulfill, that role. That could actually help to mitigate any conflicts or any potential problems between, for example, customers and the employee. That would, create a bit of problems with the scores or stars for the company or image, building the image for the company. When it comes to management, let's say we have a head of manager who's really not getting on with one of his employees, and the employee is also very stubborn because does not really see the manager as appropriate manager to lead him or her. This is very important part of how HR can step in and try to help them or support them in rebuilding the relationship. It's not building the relationship. The relationship already was there. It was just not correctly approached from both sides and from the third parties. And third parties, I'm talking about other colleagues, other departments, and HR and management itself. So it takes a lot of courage for HR, I would say, to step in those kind of situations, because I would say we are guilty of sometimes just, okay, we can move that person to another department or to another section, or, if that person doesn't perform, we would, terminate or so on, or, progressive disciplinary would have been applied. But I actually disagree with this process. I believe that every person has abilities to fix, what's broken. So if the manager and the employee is keen on rebuilding, HR should be able to step in and help them to rebuild by communication, by training, by any other tools that could be used to support them, right? So I think...
Right, yeah, we will summarize the tools again, absolutely, for our audience. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think HR, as in all, has great abilities and capabilities to do so. And it's a big job. That's how I feel HR could support.
Thank you. These were great points. And now that we talked about HR, Avni, I would like to ask you a really simple question, but would like to know this from you. Why developing communication skills, not even among HR, but even among just employees, is so important to to maybe prevent conflict or to effectively address it once it arises?
See, at the very crux of conflict is bad communication. Bad communication leads to conflict. So it is of utmost importance that we tackle this issue at its root by developing our communication skills. Now, communication is a two-way street, and it was often mistaken that what we say is important, but what the other person hears and interprets holds much more value. Because sometimes, due to some sort of barriers, for example, language barriers, geographical barriers, ego barriers, so many barriers, what I may say and what others would interpret would be two different things. So that's why developing communication skills becomes so important, especially in a workplace, especially in teams wherein all of us are working towards a common goal. So, yeah.
So I like it. You started talking about sometimes the conflict is not on the side of somebody who is talking, but on the side of the receiver because we don't understand and we filter it through our own perception. So let's summarize. It's a question to both of you. What are some common sources and roots of conflicts and how this lack of communication heavily affects it? So any of you can start.
Okay. So
Avni?
So, as per my belief, there are two major sources of bad communication, rather of workplace conflict. One is lack of empathy, and the other is bad communication skills. Now, lack of empathy is something that really makes it way towards bad communication skills. Now, what it leads to is misinterpretation of responsibilities, of miscommunication of expectations within the teams, within the manager, the employee, and it can, come across as like a negative feedback or not defining the KRAs, for example, and the wrong tone of voice. So all of these are some major, like lack of empathy and bad communication skills actually are the major sources of workplace conflict. At the same time, when employees are unwilling to break through their barriers of communication, of ego, and talk through, that is when a simple disagreement can really snowball into a conflict, because disagreements are very common, but conflict is something when people have not been communicating, people have not been there for each other, that it becomes a conflict and it eventually reaches the HR. So, yeah.
So how can HR take up? And what are some common sources of problems, Iwona?
So actually, I would like to add something to what Avni just said, and I totally agree that it all about our perception, but it's also about stereotypes. So when you work in a multinational organization with various people from various backgrounds, let's say one person has a certain way of I would say speaking, which could be elevated voice or expressions on the face. Everything is actually very important, right? But from what I've seen in most of the conflict that I had to mitigate or try to find solution to, it was either the one side or the other had a very bad experience previously with something that triggered them to misunderstand what the other person was trying to do or say, because it's not just the words, it's our actions, our body language, our face expression, everything. So I always say that HR should have a poker face because it's supposed to be neutral. When you want to find solution and find a way to support the other parties in finding common grounds, I wouldn't say finding solution comes as a steps. It doesn't come straight away. It comes gradually. It comes with time, because if you have just a simple disagreement about the process of something, but if it has a bigger root, as Avni said, the time and process would be longer to find a common or find solution. So the most important part for HR is to find a way to find the common grounds between the two, where the HR can step in and then try to mitigate. I usually, what I do, if I see two parties disagree, I speak to first and then I speak to the other. I test them by asking them following questions. Even if they answer me, I will try to ask them in a different way, in a different pattern, and see their reactions. Then I can actually read. I'm an NLP practitioner, so I kind of look for every aspect of what we do, how we behave, how our mimics are, which way we are looking at, whether we are trying to find some visual memory or we're trying to be more grounded. So there is so many ways for the HRs to support and step in, find that one component that you asked, to find a solution. I always encourage every HR to try to do either behavioral development trainings or NLP, because NLP is such a beautiful training. So I'm not trying to say that, but
I know, as far as I understand, both of you practice NLP, right,
Yes.
Iwona?
Yes.
So basically, I love actually NLP because it's a great tool for HR. I apply that a lot. I've done it because I'm HR, and I think that it would help me. There are different people in my industry think different ways, and everything works for them. Because what works for me will not work for the others, and you have to always find yourself first if you're trying. I would say also what people take as a mistake, or they try to fix someone before understanding, can I do it myself? For example, if I have two people also that I could be biased, I would ask my team member who's more senior from the others to step in and support me in that, because you always have to measure your abilities, because every conflict is sensitive, right? You can actually escalate it even further if you approach it wrongly.
Thank you. So Iwona has already started answering my last question, which is, whenever it's good, whenever the conflict arises, what, as a part of HR or as a communication expert, what steps or strategies can you advise to use whenever it happens? So Iwona has already answered us, but you can continue later. So Avni, what are your communication expert insight on this?
So I would say there are three steps, like three major steps to tackle any conflict. The first step is active listening. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't do it because we are scrolling on our phones when the other person is talking. So active listening is when you're present in the conversation, your mind, body, soul, all three things are in tandem with the ongoing conversation. Now, when you're active listening, the benefits are, A, you are telling the other person that I respect you, I value you, I am here for this conflict resolution. And B, it gives you a chance to really understand some of the unspoken feelings and words as well. Only if you pay attention to the person, like their facial expressions, their body language. So that really gives you a chance to be a better listener. So active listening is the first step. The second step I would say is that communication is not just verbal, like Iwona has also pointed out, and I also mentioned it just recently, that communication also entails a lot of non-verbal part. When we talk about non-verbal, it is important to pay attention to your facial expressions, your body expansiveness, how your smile is looking like, your hand gestures, and all of these movements. Because like I said, you might be saying something else, but if you're not feeling it here, it will not reflect clearly on your facial expressions or in your gestures. So I might say, hey, I'm feeling very well, but if my face is looking like this, clearly it doesn't communicate right. So yeah, so the second thing was to pay attention to your non-verbals as well. The third and the last important part is that communication is a balance of how you say and what you say. A lot of us pay attention only on the what to say part, but how you say has more importance than what you say. Now, what you say is dependent on a case-to-case basis on the reason why the conflict is happening. And I'm sure Iwona would be able to explain more on the what part, but what is also dependent on the other party's personality type. Because a lot of communication needs to be molded as per what the other person wants to hear, like I said at the very start. At the same time, your how determines what taste the conflict resolution would eventually lead to. Would it leave the parties with a bitter taste? How would it leave them? So when we talk about how entails your tone of voice, your volume, your speed. So how is that part? Now add to it the magical touch of mirroring somebody's body language and verbal qualities, and I'm sure a lot of conflicts would be resolved. So yeah.
Thank you. These were really structured and great insights. Iwona, do you have something to add, especially on what part?
I think there are a lot of things that we can talk about in terms of what or how, but I think there's a lot of triggers that cause the what. You know, as Avni said, personalities, but I think also our experiences. You know, some people. What I try to always look at, if I have a problem with an employee who's, let's say, was performing very well and then start slightly going in a different direction, has very bad temper, or something happens, right? The best way is to try to find the reason. If you cannot do it yourself, you always find someone who can. You have to always try to find this root, I wouldn't say cause, but reason for that person to behave in certain ways. I would say you can have a very bad, not bad, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. You can have very expressional manager who's very, who can come across very aggressive, let's say. As a HR, let's say he's a senior to me, right? I have to find a way to talk to him and or her, and find the way to try to kind of tell them that this is maybe not the right way to be, but how to do it. Again, you have to find why, and what happened that this person got so loud or so aggressive or so, you know, emotional. I say when someone is aggressive, I think it's a part of our emotional state that we sometimes enter. I do, you know, we all do, but it's how we control it. It's up to us how we learn to control it, right? And when the conflict happens and people start fighting, literally, I'm using word fighting because it's very strong, and it's sometimes very it's correct way to kind of describe certain arguments, because people can be very vicious in verbally, you know, so that has to be avoided at all costs. But you cannot always. I've seen it in my own eyes with my own colleagues. They did not spare each other. So it was very difficult to navigate through that, especially it was my very early years in HR. So, but every such circumstances teaches you. Either will give you a reason to make the excuses, because I said the what, it could be an excuse. I can behave like that, you know. I think he got away or she got away with it. I can do it, you know. So the what, it's not only just us, but it's also our reasoning, you know, how we are trying. Let's say we got promoted. So what? We're supposed to step in and be the bigger person in that point. But sometimes people take this as for granted and neglect the bigger part of being a leader, right? So then that creates conflicts. So that the what.
Thank you so much. Actually, like, as we're wrapping up, I'd like to say that I absolutely enjoyed this conversation, because as I expected, both of your answers really complemented each other from the HR side and from the communication side. Absolutely. Thank you so much for this. I'd like to say that if our audience enjoyed the conversation just as much as I did, I highly encourage you to check how you can work with these wonderful ladies to solve your personal workplace problems. So again, thank you so much. I hope to see you again, and I'm wishing you the best day, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day. Bye, guys.
Bye.